It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant pride.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Big Blue Kickoff Live on this Friday afternoon. It's all brought to you by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. I am John Schmeelk, joined by Matthew Citak, taking your phone calls from the Atkins Sacramento Hill Podcast Studio. Keep getting better at 201-939-4513. We'll take your calls. We'll talk draft. We'll talk free agency. Whatever you want to talk about, we're here for you. We're going to be joined by Jed May, who covers Georgia for Rivals and UGAsports.com, to talk about some Georgia prospects in just a little bit. Mr. Citak, how are you, buddy?
I'm good. Glad to be hosting with you today.
It's been a while.
We don't get to ever host too often.
You can blame Dottino for that.
There's a lot of things I can blame Tino for.
How's everything going, man?
Good.
Your Vanderbilt Commodores with the win last night? Yesterday afternoon, pardon me.
We snuck by, but a win is a win. On to Nebraska.
You guys are the 5 seed, right?
We are the 5 seed, which
5-12 is always dangerous.
Don't even get me started on that. We beat Florida in the SEC tournament, the number 1 team in the country. We lose in the championship at the SEC tournament, and yet somehow dropped to a 5 seed when we should have been 4 seed. I know it doesn't sound like a big difference, but it is. Now we got Nebraska tomorrow night.
And they had a heck of a first-round performance.
Yeah,
they
absolutely
looked good.
Dominated. That is not going to be an easy game.
All right, now let's go out to the guest line, and we welcome in somebody who probably did not have quite as much fun watching college basketball yesterday, and that is Jed May, who covers Georgia sports and football specifically for Rivals and UGAsports.com. Jed, you got John Schmeelk and Matthew Citak up here in East Rutherford, New Jersey at the Giants facility. Hope you're doing okay this morning after what happened last night against St. Louis.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other way to describe it. That was embarrassing. It's not like Georgia basketball set the highest bar for itself in the world, but that was pretty low even for them to be down 42 or whatever it was to St. Louis in the second half last night. So, but having fun watching everything else. I got Kentucky and Santa Clara on the TV, and it's the best few days of the sports calendar. Some of the best few days on the sports calendar, anyway. All year long. Yeah,
no question about it. I will admit, the Schmeelk household was happy last night. My wife is a Billiken. She went to SLU. So she very much enjoyed that as they hit about 2 billion three-pointers over the course of that game. All right, Jed, let's start here. If I had to ask you, just as someone that watched Georgia football all year and obviously knows all about the program, who's the best Georgia player in this year's draft class?
I think there's a couple options, and I'm sure I'm not breaking any news. I think Zachariah Branch, just because what he can do with the ball in his hands, like there were so many plays where, okay, you're in a 3rd and 12, and you're just going to throw a quick screen to one of these guys, try to pick up a few yards, and he makes so many guys miss, and it gets a first down, creates a big play, scores a touchdown. Like he's unreal with the ball in his hands, even more so than I even thought coming out of USC. I think you could make a case for maybe the best pro prospect is Monroe Freeling, because he shot out of draft boards, he had the big combine. I think his best potential is ahead of him, so maybe he's not the best right now. And then defensively, I think C.J. Allen is really, really good. I remember seeing him. I cover recruiting for Georgia too, so I remember seeing him at a track meet in high school. And I'm like, man, this kid is built like a tank, and he is still built that way. He's got good speed, and he's played a lot over the past 3 years. So I think if you're looking for best player right now, it's probably Branch or Allen. But I think, when we're looking back on those conversations 10, 15 years, I think Monroe Freeling could end up being the best pro with a bunch.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, prior to the start of free agency, Monroe Freeling was perhaps the most intriguing name to me, at least from Georgia, because of playing at tackle. I know obviously he played left tackle last year, and the Giants have a left tackle anchor in Andrew Thomas, but right tackle was a little bit more of a question mark. Obviously, then the Giants went out and signed Jermaine Illuminor, which sort of, took care of that need. So I'm not sure how much Monroe Freeling would be a match for the Giants now. So now the name that really stands out to me, and you just mentioned him a little bit, is C.J. Allen. He was tremendous against the run, not even just last year, but the last 2 seasons. And the run defense has been something around here that, has been lacking a little bit the last couple of years, and, clearly was an emphasis this offseason for the Giants was improving that run defense. So can you just talk a little bit more about C.J. Allen's game and, how he kind of overcomes not being the biggest guy in the field to still being such a productive linebacker?
Yeah, I mean, he's a thumper. He's a little bit more of a traditional, I guess, quote-unquote linebacker than maybe his teammate Raylan Wilson. Like, Raylan Wilson's a guy next year who I think is going to blow up the combine just because he's a very, 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 very athletic guy. He returned kickoffs for his team back in high school. But for CJ, I think he's just a very smart guy. I mean, he played a lot. He got thrown into the fire as a freshman due to some injuries, and that kick-started the football IQ that he already had. He's the green dot guy. He's calling what is a pretty complex Georgia defense against obviously some really good offenses in the SEC. So I think you make up for maybe not being the most physically imposing guy, although he's plenty size or weight-wise anyway. He's fine, but he makes up for it with the football IQ and the sideline to sideline, the speed and the instincts that really make him so good. I mean, he's just all over the place. Every game you watch for he's a guy that you really can't take off the field too much, that defense.
I got two questions for you specifically on Allen. One, how is he in coverage? Trailing tight ends, following those types of guys, whether in zone or man. And then number two, given he's only 230, how important is it for the defensive line in front of him to keep him clean so you keep some of those offensive linemen off him so he can just kind of run to the ball and hit?
Yeah, I'll start with your second one first. I mean, I think that's huge, especially, when you're getting to the NFL and the linemen are bigger. They're, in a lot of cases, more athletic. So, yeah, he's a guy that's going to have to be kept clean, but also, I mean, he'll probably can get a little bigger. But, yeah, he doesn't have much more to get out of that frame, I don't think, than 230. And then your first question, like, I think coverage is still kind of the question, and I think he's kind of battled some nagging stuff throughout this pre-draft process because I know he didn't work out at the combine. I don't believe he worked out at least, or I think he did. He did a little bit of pro day the other day, but not a ton. So I think that's what teams are going to have to decide when they're evaluating if you're going to draft this kid late in the first round, early in the second round, mid first round, like whatever it is. Can he be a 3-down guy? And if you don't think he can now, can he develop into that? I think he's still got a lot of growth to do in that area. Personally, but I think he's also got the athleticism to at least be serviceable in that regard down the line.
Yeah, so another guy on the defensive side of the ball I don't think has been mentioned yet, Kristen Miller.
I love Kristen Miller, by the way. He's great.
Yeah, he is great. Similarly to Freeling, though, I believe he's a nose tackle. So
yeah, I think that's probably true.
With Dexter Lawrence here, in terms of at least a starting nose tackle, obviously that's spoken for already, but what is it about Christian Miller's game, that makes him so good? Obviously, he's got the elite size, 6'4", 321. He's huge, and he's productive at Georgia. But what about it? What about his game, I guess, stands out, and what areas of his game do you think he could improve a little bit in order to really take that next step once he does enter the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a technically sound guy. What Georgia they want these linemen to do. Going back to the Jordan Davises and the Jalen Carters of the world is like we were talking about with C.J. Allen. Occupy these linemen and let the linebackers clean everything up behind him. And I think when he gets to the NFL and if he gets in a system where a team will let him use his quickness, his upfield penetration, all that kind of stuff, I think he can be a really disruptive interior guy. Now, I don't think he is Jalen Carter or Jordan Davis, but I think he's a really talented guy. I think pass rush is probably where he's got the most room to grow. But he's already a very solid run defender for a Georgia defense that, going back to last spring, it kind of fell on Kirby Smart, made it a point of emphasis. Hey, 2025, we need to stop the run a lot better. And this unit did that this past season. I think Kristen Miller has been a big part of that. He was like y'all said, that guy in the middle who's got to anchor everything, who's got to occupy double teams and let those linebackers roam free, and he did that. So he's an asset to the defensive line and to the linebackers in run coverage or run defense. And I think once he gets in a system where he can show a little bit more of that athleticism, he'll be a bigger factor in the pass rush department too.
It's funny, and I think you're right, because when you watch Miller, they actually use him a lot as a looper on a lot of twists and stunts, which you usually don't see for like a 320-pound guy, but I think that kind of flashed some of his athletic upside, where I do think there's something here with him as an upfield penetrating defensive lineman, just given his athletic tools. He moves a lot better than most 320-pound guys do.
Yeah, for sure. And he's and again, he's been a guy who he battled some injuries at Georgia, but he's been around a long time, and he played a lot of football and learned from. I think Jalen Carter was still here when he got here. He knew Jordan Davis throughout his recruitment. All those guys that you learn from, you learn a lot about the game, and you pick up the football IQ, and then you got a guy like Trey Scott, the defensive line coach in Georgia, who has sent all those guys to the NFL since he's been on Kirby Smart's staff. Yeah, the football IQ, you don't got to worry about. The technique and fundamentals, you don't got to worry about. It's improving some of those, I guess, technical elements of pass rush and stuff, where I think you could really go to the next level and be worthy of a late first round, early second round pick if a team decides to take him there.
And sticking on the defense, but moving back a couple of levels, Dalen Everett, projected to be, I think possibly a late day 2, maybe early day 3 pick. He's got great size. Obviously, he's 6'1", 196. And I know at Georgia, he played mostly on the outside, but a little bit on the inside. I've read different scouting reports that say where he might be projected best in the NFL. It could be as like a big nickelback. Other people think he could stay outside. Where do you see him really fitting in best in the NFL? What position?
I think it's still probably outside, just because obviously he's got the most experience. Or I think back to when Kamari Lassiter was coming out of Georgia, he got a little bit more even experience at that nickel position in Georgia's defense than Dalen did, at least in games. I'm sure he ripped there and practiced some. But I think if you look at him as a potential nickel, he's definitely a guy who's willing to come up and defend the run, which you got to do at nickel and outside as well. So. I don't hate the idea of somebody trying him there if they believe in it, if their corner situation is fine. But I think his home is on the outside just because he's a long, rangy guy who can match up with some of these bigger receivers that you're going to face in the NFL. Like a George Pickens in y'all's division. You think of A.J. Brown if he's still on the Eagles by then. He's a guy that can match up physically with those guys, but he's also a guy that I think coaches can depend on to come up and play the run. He's played. I think that's the thing with all these Georgia guys. They've all, except for Monroe Freeling, they've played so much football. I think I looked this up at the combine. Let me see what it was for Dalen. Dalen played 55 games in college. He was around forever between special.
Okay. I guess we'll keep going then for the record, right? All right. So here we go. So let's talk a little bit about the offense here, Jed. We got Monroe Freeling. You mentioned him off the top. I guess my simple question for you on him, is he viewed as an Andrew Thomas level left tackle if he gets where he could get from an athletic standpoint? And how far does he have to go? As we've seen him talked about in mock drafts now as a potentially a top 10 pick, where I think if you watch him play, you don't see that. But does he have that? Was he a 5-star recruit? Was he thought of that way his whole time at Georgia, that he could develop into that Andrew Thomas type of tackle on the left side?
Yeah, no. Going back to his recruiting, he was not like this 5. I believe, if I remember right, he was like the highest rated guy in that class, but he was like a high 4-star. I think not a slouch by any means, but yeah, he came in and. I don't remember him playing a lot as a freshman. He's rotated in, and then this year he was the full-time starter. But I think it's really the last half of the year. Because I remember going back to that Sugar Bowl last year when Georgia played Notre Dame, and he battled injuries some last year too. But he had a rough game. Gunnar Stockton gets strip sacked right before halftime, and that was on Monroe Freeling. And then you're kind of like, oh man, is Georgia going to be able to go through 2025 with Monroe Freeling as its left tackle? And I think his progression has gotten so much better, even from the end of the season, what we're seeing him do at the combine and pro day and stuff. So, I think he can, if he keeps ascending, which he should, which he's shown the capability to do. Yeah, I think he can be a solid. Kirby Smart said at a pro day the other day, a 10, 15-year guy in the NFL. Now he's got to get bigger. He's probably got to get a little bit stronger. But as far as the athleticism stuff, I mean, he checks every box there. I'm sure y'all have probably heard the story. His mom's a yoga instructor in South Carolina, so he's done yoga forever. So all the athleticism and the agility and that kind of stuff, he checks those boxes. He's just got to get stronger and probably more refined a little bit. But I remember when I talked about Zachariah Branch on those screens earlier, a lot of that was due to Monroe Freeling being able to get out there and pick off nickels and corners and safeties, trying to make those plays. Like, he's what made a lot of that work. So I think it's bigger and stronger. Yeah, he could be a very, very much worth a top. I mean, selfishly, I'm a Browns fan. My family's from Ohio, so if they took Monroe Freeling at 6, I wouldn't be upset about it for sure.
All right, last one for me. I think we touched on basically all of the guys that are projected to be day 1, even day 2 guys. So now moving on to the potential day 3, or even guys that may not get drafted but will sign somewhere as an undrafted free agent. Which guy, or if there's more than one from that group that's a little bit lower down the list, would you say fans should keep an eye on? Because he could actually not only make a name for himself in the NFL, but put together a pretty solid career moving forward.
Yeah, I think offensively, you look at Dylan Bell, who mainly played receiver at Georgia, but I mean, going back to high school, he played a lot of wildcat quarterback. He played running back. He played some running back at Georgia. And he said at the combine that some teams have talked to him about running back. And I almost, if I was a GM, which I wish I was, could be paid a lot better than I am, but it would be very tempting to take a late round flyer on Dylan Bell and try to make him into a running back, or maybe a poor man's Deebo Samuel, where you can line him up everywhere. Because I mean, he's tough as nails. He's dependable. He's played a lot of football, and he's not a burner. He ran, I want to say 4.5 maybe at the combine, and he's not the greatest athlete in the world, but he's so versatile that I think his skill set would be really appealing to me if I'm a GM and looking for a guy that can create matchups, whether it's in the slot, whether it's outside, whether it's lining him up in the backfield. If you could, I think he's thrown some passes in his career. You can have him be wildcat quarterback. That's a guy that can do a lot of stuff, and I think that's a day 3 guy. Again, when you're in that area where a lot of these last couple round picks are kind of lottery tickets anyway, I'd take a guy who's played a lot of football at a winning program and see if you can mold him into something, especially if I'm, an offensive-minded coach or offensive-centric GM.
Last 2 from me, Jed, and I appreciate you joining us today. Just one quick follow-up is the Giants could be trying to draft a wide receiver of the future at some point in this year's draft. You talked a lot about Zachariah Branch. So just one quick follow-up on what you talked about him in the beginning. He didn't run a very advanced route tree at Georgia, right? To your point, it was a lot of stuff around the line of scrimmage, quick screens and stuff like that. Then I see him show up at the Combine in Indianapolis, and he looks like he's a really good route runner. Why did they limit the way they used him so much at Georgia, where he was so much, and I don't want to use the word gimmicky, because I don't want it to sound detrimental, but a guy that was used primarily in the screen game, and they didn't really let him flex his wide receiver muscles as someone that was catching balls downfield.
You sound like a man that has spent a lot of time on the old Georgia football message boards, my friend. That question's been bandied about a lot. I mean, I think it's a combination of some things. I think earlier in the year, the offensive line had a lot of injuries, so they were maybe worried about pass protection, so you had to go there. They lost Colby Young, who's another guy that I think could be a day 3 guy, maybe for the Giants or somebody else, a big-bodied guy. They lost him midway through the year, and that further limited your ability to stretch the field. And then, there's some questions about Gunnar Stockton and his ability to throw over the field, and we can talk about those next year when he's being scrutinized in the draft process. but yeah, I think at the Combine and at Pro Day the other day, he was saying, like y'all said, I am a complete route runner, and I have wanted to show teams that. And I think he has. You look at his quickness, you look at these, the routes he runs, these shuttle drills, the cone drills, all that kind of stuff. He's got the change of direction to be an elite weapon in the slot. I think, he's not going to go up and moss somebody down the field, but if you start hitting him on these deep overs and stuff too, he's an elite weapon. And you add in return game stuff, and that's just another thing. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a mystery. There's some things that you can point to and explain it, but yeah, as Georgia fans look back on this year, they're kind of like, Zach. I mean, he set a school record for receptions. He had 82 or 83 receptions, so it's a school record, but you're kind of like, would this offense have gotten more out of him if he had, 65 receptions that were a little bit farther down the field?
And you mentioned the last guy I wanted to ask you about. That's Colby Young, who's 6'5", ran a sub 4.5 40 at the Combine. I saw him at the Shrine Bowl down in Dallas. You see the physical skills. Describe the type of is he your typical big X that it's going to win contested balls down the field, deep outs, things like that? Give me a little thumbnail on Colby Young and why, given the profile, he didn't kind of blow up more in his time at Georgia.
Yeah, first of all, that 40 time was phenomenal. I mean, we were flying back from Indianapolis, and we were like, yeah, anything in the high 4.5s range would be pretty good for him. We saw that time come up. We were like, oh, wow, okay. He had his Georgia career was weird because he had injuries, and then he had an off field. He had a domestic thing that has since been cleared, and all that was cleared up, but that cost him most, if not all, of the season. He broke his leg halfway through this year and came back and played in the Sugar Bowl, if that tells you anything about how tough he is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when he first got to Georgia, he was mainly that contested catch guy. Like his first spring game, he caught 2 balls over the middle with a guy draped over him and a back shoulder fade in the end zone. You're like, yep, okay, well that's a niche that's been filled. And I think this past year before he got hurt, he really flashed more. He got down the field more. He got open. He caught a couple of those quick screens, the Zach Branch specials, and made some guys miss and bowled over guys. So I think especially this year, and that's why it kind of sucked to see him get hurt, because he had really started to show that he had rounded out that complete receiver skill set, and then he's out for the back half of the year and didn't really get to show it. And even the Sugar Bowl, he's obviously not at full strength. So, yeah, I think he's a guy that, like y'all said, he checks every box, and I think Georgia shorted him, 10 pounds on his roster measurement. He's listed at 215, I think, maybe at the Combine, or 218 or something like that. So he's got all the size, and I think even if he doesn't develop any farther than he is, which I think he should, he's an elite weapon in the contested catch and back shoulder fades, red zone targets, all that kind of stuff. He's a guy that can help out there for sure.
All right, Jed. Tell the folks if we got Giant fans that are also Georgia Bulldog fans out there, where they can find all the great work you're doing.
Yeah, UGAsports.com is part of the Rivals and On3 network. So, got all kind of stuff going on there. Basketball, there were some interesting comments made from the basketball team last night. If anybody wants to read about 25-point loss that happened about midnight Eastern time. And yeah, well, Georgia football, basketball, baseball, recruiting is kind of something I dabble into. So yeah, anybody from East Rutherford or New York, or I got family up in Lake George, so anybody up there who wants to read about the Georgia Bulldogs, that's the place.
So you know what, Jed? I'm going to ask you one more thing before we say goodbye. Who's the next Georgia Bulldog football star that we're going to be hearing about the next couple of years that we should be keeping an eye on as we start watching college football last year? Who's the next monster, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, whatever, that's coming out of Georgia that we should be ready for?
A couple for next year. I'll give you, Ellis Robinson, the corner, who his arms or his wingspan's about 170 inches, and he's gotten bigger and stronger. KJ Bolden's a 5-star safety who started from day one, and then you got DeMello Jones, who, kind of like I mentioned with Kamari Lassiter earlier, has played inside and outside. So that could be 3 DBs right there that go pretty high if they all decide to leave. Raylan Wilson, the linebacker I mentioned earlier, he's going to blow up the Combine because he's a freak athlete. And then a couple years down the line, I think the defensive lineman, Elijah Griffin, is a guy who, kind of like y'all just said, I remember last year when we were doing pro day stuff, and some of the guys who were leaving were like, yeah, this kid that just got here, Elijah Griffin, that's been on campus 2 months, the quote literally was, he's the next Jalen Carter. So
wow. Expectations
are high. He cracked a very deep and talented rotation as a freshman. And there's going to be some big things down the line for that kid for sure. So no shocker that there's a lot of defensive guys coming in the pipeline, but there's going to be tight ends coming. There's all kind of guys coming on the offensive side of the ball as well. But first rounders are going to be full. First round is going to have a lot of Georgia defenders in it in the next couple of years for sure.
Good stuff, Jed. Appreciate the time, my friend. Enjoy the rest of your offseason.
Thank you, Jed.
Absolutely, guys. Anytime.
Jed May from Rivals, UGAsports.com. Fantastic job. You knew a Georgia defensive lineman was going to get mentioned there.
Of course. Every year. The Georgia defense.
It is. It's always good.
Occasional offensive lineman every couple of years.
I do wonder why C.J. Allen continues not to test. I know they said he had some swelling from a meniscus and he had some type of procedure, but he did drill work. Do you think that's going to hurt him? Like, could that push him into round 2 here? If he never tests, is that going to? He's only 230 pounds. If you're only 230 pounds and you're a linebacker, you want that 230-pound linebacker to be a really, really good athlete. And without testing numbers, yes, I know you have the GPS and all that stuff. I get it. Is that going to scare teams off a little bit and maybe push him into round 2?
I think it's definitely possible. I mean, I think he was looking at maybe getting into the end of round 1, but I kind of think that would have been his ceiling pretty much regardless.
I think his ceiling would be Dallas at 20. They really need a linebacker. He's probably the next guy after Sonny Styles. That, to me, is his earliest that he could possibly go.
And that would, at least right now, that would be pretty rich, I would think.
I think so too, but I also think once you get past the first 15 or so picks, this is going to be the wild, wild west, man.
That is true. It's going to be a lot of teams just, drafting for need because as a lot of people, a lot of different draft analysts have said, once you get past that, top 15 or so guys, guys from the next, maybe even the next 50 plus guys are all going to be pretty similarly ranked. And it's going to just all depend on what teams have on their own respective draft boards, which, typically I feel like we do see that a lot. I would say almost every year, but I feel like we don't see that until a lot further down normally, not starting, potentially halfway through the first round.
Yeah, no question about it. We haven't done a show together in a while, as you mentioned earlier. By the way, you have some open lines. You want to give us a call at 201-939-4513. You should check out the John Siddle podcast. By the way, I had a bunch of good episodes come up this week. Go check it out. Chris Bizignano was on yesterday. Today, Eric Edholm, who does a great job covering the draft for NFL.com.
Just had a mock draft just come out, I think, yesterday.
Yes, and he teases that.
There you go.
On the podcast. So we will talk about that. One of Dan Salamone's favorites up there. So he loves some Eric Edholm. He's up there. Next week, we're going to have Ryan Wilson pop on. We have all our free agent interviews from earlier when the guys came in, did their first interviews. That's all up on the Giants Siddle podcast. Go find it. Favorite podcast platform, Giants.com, Giants app, or the Giants YouTube channel. So, like I was saying, we haven't hosted together in a while here, Matt. And again, give us a call. We'll take your comments at 201-939-4513. What's your take now on where the Giants are looking in the draft and what they should be thinking about here with free agency and with the first wave, or maybe first 2 waves, you want to call it, of free agency in the books? What are your overarching thoughts right now?
Okay, so unlike what our good friend Mr. Dottino might think, and he has said on the show, I think
no needs. Every hole has been filled.
I think in terms of where the Giants might go at number 5, honestly, I don't think much has changed in the last couple of weeks since free agency started. I'm
not even sure 37 has changed for me. But anyway, go ahead.
I think the only thing now that I feel pretty confident in saying is I don't think the Giants will take an offensive tackle at 5, which I don't even know how likely that would have been at 5 a couple of weeks ago, because even the top offensive linemen in this draft, the top tackles are not considered to be top 5, maybe even top 10. I mean, Monroe Freeling's working his way up draft boards, it seems like.
Which is telling, by the way, because if they was a lineman that was worth a top 10 pick in a normal draft, people wouldn't be pushing Monroe Freeling into the top 10.
Very true. So with Jermaine Illuminor coming back, I don't think offensive tackle will be a position that they draft in the first round, probably even the second round at this point, because, Jermaine Illuminor got signed to a multi-year deal. Andrew Thomas is locked in for a few more years. So that's the only position where I feel pretty confident in saying what I thought was maybe a possibility 2 weeks ago, I no longer think so. Everything else I think is still on the table. I think Sonny Styles is still very much in play, despite signing Tremaine Edmonds and bringing back Micah McFadden. I think if you have the potential to make Micah McFadden your third linebacker, right, and Darius Muasau your fourth linebacker, and have the 2 starting guys in the middle be Tremaine Edmonds and Sonny Styles, that is a tremendous linebacker core right
Where
there.
Do I sign?
I think that would be, not even I think, that would be, at least on paper, the best linebacker core the Giants have had in a long time.
2 linebackers of that size and length that can also run?
Yeah.
Whew.
So Sonny Styles is still very much in play. I think there's been a little bit less buzz about Carnell Tate at 5, partly due to what he did at the Combine. And, I would say in terms of priorities, maybe wide receiver got pushed down a little bit in terms of needs.
I also just think most people don't think of him as a lock and load number one wide receiver in the league.
I mean, there are a lot of people that think Jordan Tyson's the number one receiver in this draft.
I think if he didn't
he has his own issues.
If he did not have injury issues, I think a good amount of people would have Tyson ranked over Tate.
I agree, but he does have those issues.
100%.
He's missed a lot of time in college due to those injury issues. So, I mean, I would not be surprised, I would say, if wide receiver is one of the first 2 picks because, the reported signings or the reported length of the contracts for both Darnell Mooney and Calvin Austin, both reportedly, 1-year deals. So it's not like they are locked in and loaded for years down the road.
Which, by the way, aside from Illuminor and Edmonds, almost all the reported contract lengths that the Giants came to, and likely, correct, and likely, right, were 1 year. So, like, corner, wide receiver, Patrick Ricard, fullback, that's a different category. I'm just going to push him aside, right? Ardarius Washington, Jason Pinnock, 1 years.
Yeah.
If you've guys on 1-year contracts, it should have 0 impact on what you do in the NFL draft.
100%.
0.0.
So I would say the one thing that maybe has changed for me, and again, we're only, it's March 20th. We are a little over 1 week into free agency. Guys will continue to sign for months leading up to the training camp. Guys will be signing. So just because the Giants haven't made a move at a certain position up to this point doesn't mean that they will not moving forward.
Yeah.
But I do think, which I maybe didn't think so 2 weeks ago, but I don't think you can completely close the door on, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his name, the Penn State guard.
Vega Ioane.
Yes, Ioane. I think he could be in play at 5.
Ooh,
and I know that is
rich for me.
Rich in terms of positional value, taking a guard at 5. I understand, but there are a lot of people who know a lot of, more about football than I do. I will admit that say he is the best guard prospect since Quentin Nelson. And how many Giants fans regret the Giants not taking Quentin Nelson back in 2018 when they had the opportunity to?
Yeah, I would not put him in the same class as Quentin Nelson, though.
I agree.
Right.
But they're saying he is the best prospect at that position since Quentin Nelson. Even if he's a little bit below Quentin Nelson, you're not getting a perennial all-pro maybe, but you're still getting potentially, a lot of people consider him the best offensive lineman in this draft, period, regardless of position.
Here's the funny thing. I think if you put Francis Mauigoa at guard, I think he's a better guard than Vega Ioane.
That's fair. I feel like most people are considering him to be a tackle.
Right, but
looking at him as tackle. But I guess, if you're the Giants at 5 and you're considering a guard, take away the name, you're just considering a guard.
And you'd rather have a guard that also has tackle flex then too, right?
Yeah, then that is fair. But look, that is the one position I would say that just based on the, at least to this point, the only moves being made at guard position being more depth positions, between bringing Aaron Stinney back, Evan Neal back, Azudu back.
They've thrown numbers at the problem at guard, but I don't think they have the guy yet.
And I would say the depth at the position is good.
Yeah.
But right now, I don't know who would be starting at right guard. If the Giants had to suit up for a game this Sunday, I don't know who would be starting at right guard.
And I think it's important to note that Greg Van Roten is still available. At this time last year, he was not signed by the Giants either. He was a later signing. I believe he signed sometime in April, if I'm not mistaken.
I thought last year
Let's see.
He signed pretty quickly. I know his first year here, he signed after training camp had already begun. But I could be mistaken.
I'm going to look up the date. You could be right.
I lost all sense of time.
Oh, no, you're right. March 19th.
And that was when he officially signed.
So it was actually yesterday. Correct.
Yeah, so the reports were sometime within the first week. Because I do remember last year being like, all right, they're not. I remember both sides didn't play the waiting game this year like they did.
It wasn't the first week, I don't think, last year, though, right? Wasn't it the second week?
I think the report that he agreed to terms with the Giants came out some point during that first week. I mean, if March 19th
I guess I remember wrong.
Was the day we officially announced it, then the reports came out, sometime earlier.
And I do think there are enough guards out there still where you feel like you can find the starter, which is why I'm not quite going there yet in terms of need at that position.
But not even just at, I know I mentioned 5 and I mentioned Ioane or even Moago, but at 37, and I've said this on the show before, 37 is where you might have your position of biggest need meeting the best player available, because that is the sweet spot of where a lot of the best players on the board at that early second round, there's a good chance will be interior offensive linemen.
And by the way, it could be interior offensive lineman, it could be corner, it could be wide receiver.
Yeah.
Any of those three spots could end up being the best player on the board at 37.
And those are, I think, three positions we can all agree the Giants could certainly at least afford to add another young talent to those groups.
By the way,
rooms.
What if C.J. Allen's sitting there at 37?
Well, I think if you take Sonny Styles at 5.
Well, let's say you don't.
I mean, if you don't, then yeah.
So I think that's another spot, right? There you go.
Yeah, although I will, yes, for sure. But I do think part of the reason why Sonny Styles is so appealing at 5 is just because he seems like he is just one of the best players from a pure talent perspective in this entire draft. An absolute athletic freak. I mean, we were talking before about the combo him and Edmonds would make. Not saying C.J. Allen and Edmonds and Micah would also be a very formidable trio of linebackers, but doesn't have quite the same punch as Sonny Styles and Tremaine.
I agree. Johnny Mac, take the control. Put on Channel 2 here. I want to make sure we get the NCAA tournament on here. We got to keep an eye on that as we do the show here. All right. In the meantime, Johnny Mac, let's go to our buddy Mike in Massachusetts on line 3. He'll lead us off today. Mike, what's going on, pal?
Hey, John. How are you today?
We're good.
Good. I'm calling because I'm perplexed. I was thinking of a trade.
Okay.
I got a feeling that Dallas, as you mentioned earlier, would love the linebacker. They and I know that in Giant history, we've always been jumped by NFC East teams for the player we want, as Paul Dottino will tell you all the time. But would Tennessee trade the 4th to Dallas for a 12 and the 20, and Dallas jump New York to take Styles?
That's a very steep price. Dallas does not own a second-round pick this year. It was traded in the Quinnen Williams trade. They just got a pick at the end of the third round in the Osa Odighizuwa trade. I think Dallas needs picks. They still have holes on defense. They need a linebacker. They need an edge player. They need a secondary player. I would be surprised if they move both ones to move up to 4. I think in this draft that might be a little bit steep to go from 12 to 4. Maybe if they could get back like a late 2, early 3, maybe that's something they would consider. I mean, I don't think it's impossible, Mike, but I think given all the needs the Cowboys have, I'd be surprised if they made that big of a jump.
And I also don't know how open the Titans will be to dropping that far down.
Good point,
right
too.
now they have the 4th pick, and you have a chance, if you want to, believe all the reports out there, you have a chance of adding a talent like Jeremiah Love with Cam Ward, your young number 1 overall pick quarterback from a year ago.
Or Ruben Bain or David Bailey.
I was going to say, or in one of the elite edge defenders that just will not, that level of player will not be available at 12. You'll still get a very good player, but the group of blue chip prospects in this draft, it's a pretty small group, and none of those guys are going to be around come pick number 12.
Do you think there's a chance Ruben Bain drops
to 12?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I
don't think it's impossible.
I don't think he's locked into the 3rd or 3 or 4 area that a lot of mock drafts.
But you think top 8? Top 8.
That was exactly what I was going to say. I would say top 8. I would be surprised if he got any further than that. I mean, obviously, every year we see at least one guy that we thought, this guy was a lock to go early, somehow drop. But I can't imagine he drops much further than that.
Would you think would New York trade with Dallas? Maybe the 12, 20, and Thibodeau and a 3 from Dallas?
Ooh. So if Dallas wanted to move to 5, you would get 12 and 20, and you would send back 5 and then either a 3rd-round pick. Well, the Giants don't have a 3rd-round pick to trade back, right? So
they would get Dallas's 3rd for Thibodeau.
Oh, so you want Dallas? Dallas would never. Then Dallas would have no picks in the first 3 rounds in the draft. There would be no way that Cowboys would do that.
Well, I was just thinking because they move to 5, they get Styles, they get Thibodeau, they get their linebacker, they get an edge rusher. Even though Thibodeau's on the last year.
The problem is that they have to pay Thibodeau after this year, and they've spent a lot of money on big time players. That was the whole thing with Parsons trading Parsons. So I don't think they would want to trade their 3rd for a player on the final year of a contract, given their salary cap issues with all the guys that they're paying down.
And
there.
when you
I'd love to see Styles to New York at 5, but it's just history has always shown, where Philly jumped to get the wide receiver, and Dallas jumped one other time and picked up. I can't remember who the player was. New York sitting there, and that player's like one pick away, and NFC East teams always seem to jump them and grab them. And I'm afraid that somebody's going to jump and grab Styles before New York gets that pick. And but I was just curious. Dallas needing linebackers, as you mentioned earlier. I was just thinking they might figure out a way to go up there.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate the call, my friend.
Thanks, Mike.
Good stuff.
The two instances that I believe he's talking about, obviously, was the more recent one was Devontae Smith.
I'm trying to think of the second one.
When the Eagles and Cowboys swapped. The other one that I can remember, it didn't involve anyone in the NFC East. It was
Leonard Floyd.
That
I
remember. Believe Taylor Decker was the offensive tackle.
Jack Conklin. I think it was Jack Conklin was the offensive tackle.
Who was it? Was it the Bears?
The Titans for Conklin and the Bears for Floyd.
Both traded up to the 2 picks before the Giants, and that led to the Giants. Who'd they take that? Was that the Eli Apple year?
One was Eli Apple.
Because those two were in the same draft.
Same year. That was Eli Apple draft.
Yeah.
That's correct, yes.
So those are the two examples I can think of, which...
Hopefully the Giants aren't so leaky this year.
Yeah, only one involves NFC East teams. I will say the one big difference this year is, let's say that does somehow happen, and Dallas trades up from 12, gets up to 4 to take Sonny Styles. While that would be a huge bummer, because I think both of us very much want Sonny Styles to be the pick, the Giants will still be in a very good position to take a tremendous player at number 5 if they end up taking, Caleb Downs, one of those wide receivers.
Jeremiah Love.
The Giants would still be in a position where they will be landing an elite player, where in those other years, especially, the Devontae Smith one seemed like they had it was all in for Devontae Smith. And then when that was no longer an option, then they traded back. And then, similarly, years earlier, I don't want to say, clearly they thought Leonard Floyd and or Jack Conklin would be an option.
Right.
And that obviously did not happen and led to Eli Apple. But at the 5th pick, you're still going to get a very elite player. So it's not as much of a concern for me.
I agree.
And I also think if you're going to talk about any of these NFC East teams trading up ahead of the Giants, it's going to be the Commanders at 7.
100%.
They don't have that far up to go to get in front of the Giants. The Cowboys are going to have to give up a lot to move up from 12 to 4. 7 to 4, not quite as much.
Yeah, maybe one day 2 pick to do that, which you can do. And they're in desperate need of another offensive player. They did a lot of work on defense in the offseason. They need another playmaker on offense to help Jaden Daniels. So that screams, that to me is the floor for Jeremiah Love. He won't get past Washington. I think that's as low as he'll go. And that's kind of where that'll stop. But that's not impossible. I'm still on the fence. Styles or Downs. They're both there. I think I lean Styles right now. So I'm with you. If someone would it stink? Sure. You'd love to have Sonny Styles on the board. But I think in this case, this is not a Sonny Styles or bust type of deal. Where it's if he's gone, you're screwed. That isn't what we're looking at here. So, I'm with you. I think about it, but I wouldn't be too concerned about it. Let's go to Christian in North Carolina. You can give us a call, by the way, at 201-939-4513. Christian, what's up, pal?
What's up, fellas? How's it going?
We're good, man. What do you got?
I just wanted to do a quick recap on all of free agency. Don't get me wrong. I loved pretty much all the moves that we've made. Adding more depth at the wide receiver position. I like Greg Newsome more than most. And of course, the home run bringing back Jermaine Illuminor. But I'm extremely worried about the defensive tackle position. I'm fully aware at the moment that the Giants don't have a starting right guard, but until Greg Van Roten, until I see him officially sign with another team, I'm really not all that worried about him. But not only the lack of starters at the interior of the defensive line, we really have no depth outside of Dexter. Outside of Dexter, it might actually be the worst defensive tackle room in the league, or at least bottom 3. And so like, I know the bulk of free agency is over, and we're still gonna make some depth signings, as we get closer and closer to the draft. But assuming that the Giants don't sign like a legit starter at the defensive tackle position, I know we don't want to go into the draft with like any like major needs. But again, assuming the Giants don't sign like a major defensive tackle or like a legit starter at that position, you're pretty much it's almost like we have to take one at 37. And I know this is a really deep class, and there are going to be a lot of players that I have first round grades on that slip into the second round. But I really don't want to go into the draft needing to hit on a position. Obviously I would love to have Sonny Styles, but it wouldn't kill me if either he didn't fall to us or if they didn't go with another option, because we signed Edmonds and brought back Micah. Obviously bringing back Aluminum was a home run, because honestly I don't think that there's a tackle that's worth selecting like top 5 or top 6.
Well, Christian, hold on one second. I want to ask you, in terms of the guys that are in free agency and available now, right?
Right.
Is there a defensive tackle that really appeals to you? What type of defensive tackle are you looking for? You're looking for a plugger that's going to back up Dexter Lawrence? You're looking for more of a pass rushing defensive tackle? What are you looking for to fill that hole to you?
And I was just about to get into that, because don't get me wrong, I really like Darius Alexander and do think he's going to turn into a fine player, but he's not really I don't think he's ever really going to develop into being like a plus run defender. Like he's more of like your prototypical 3-tech, kind of a hybrid edge. And so I'm really looking for the Giants to more so not necessarily find a legit crime partner, but find a legit running mate for alongside Dexter in the interior. Whether it be at the 5-tech or the 3-tech, like. And again, it's towards the end of free agency, but there's really only a handful of names that I'm really looking into. DJ Reader is, a big body.
He's a nose tackle.
3-tech, kind of a nose that could play alongside or back up Dexter. I know Christian Wilkins is still out there, but he has a lot of like troublesome issues. And like I know Calais Campbell is an ageless wonder, but it might be that time for him to maybe retire. I know he has a hardball connections. Just again, assuming that the Giants don't sign like another run-stopping defensive tackle, you almost have to take one at 37. You almost have to take one.
Well,
at
Christian, here's the thing, Christian. I think
Sorry.
you kind of just you're fine. I think you pretty much made the point I was going to make for me. That's why I asked you the question. This was a terrible defensive tackle for each class. If you look at the rankings, the only guy near the top that got signed for big time money was John Franklin Myers. Everyone else's 1-year contracts for well under $10 million a year. So this was not a group where I think you were going to find a guy that you felt really good about sliding in there as a starter next to Dexter Lawrence. So I would be fine taking a flyer. Matt, I don't know what you think on a Calais Campbell for 1 year. I think he still has played fine. You ought to do a 1-year stopgap with someone like him. There's other guys you can slide in there too that I think you can think about. But this is not a list that's full of a bunch of guys that you feel good. All right, this guy's gonna be my star for the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, for sure. But I don't think you need to look towards free agency to find someone on that level anyway, because you already have so many resources that are put towards the defensive line already. And obviously a lot of them are at the edge, but Dex is making big time money for an interior defensive lineman. So I don't think that's a position, given the needs across the rest of the roster, where you can go spend big money on at this point. And I think that's why we haven't seen the Giants make a move at that position yet. It's my guess is it seems like they're waiting the market out and waiting for some of these older veteran players that are still unsigned for their numbers to drop a little bit into the range where the Giants can afford to sign them, even if it's just for a 1-year deal, that stopgap option. But, I do think defensive tackle, interior defense line is a position that, or is a need that isn't getting talked about enough. Because I do agree that the Giants could certainly afford to add another one or even two bodies to that interior line group.
Exactly.
And just like we were talking about guards, where the 37th pick might meet best player available with a need at guard, you can make the same exact argument for defensive tackle. Because not that this is the end-all be-all, but if you want to just look at Daniel Jeremiah's latest top 50 prospect rankings, I think we can all agree he's one of the more reputable draft analysts out there. Right now he has Lee Hunter from Texas Tech at 34, Peter Woods from Clemson at 35, and Caleb Banks from Florida at 36. Now, obviously, those are different types of defensive tackles, but nonetheless, his 34, 35, and 36 ranked prospects are all defensive tackles.
Where does he have Christian Miller? Did he make it into his top 50? Do you know?
Christian Miller dropped out. He was, and also, by the way, Caden McDonald from Ohio State, 39.
There you go.
Christian Miller was 41. He just dropped out in the latest rankings.
So that's 5 guys that are between 30 and 50, pretty much. Yeah.
And that's another thing that I've been meaning to ask you guys, and then I'm going to let you guys go from here. What the heck happened to Peter Woods as to why he fell on so many draft boards? Like, coming into the year, I had him as a bona fide top 5, top 10 level pick, and now I'm seeing mocks where he's fallen into the second round. I'm like, how? I'm like,
well, there's a few reasons.
I didn't watch a lot of Clemson ball, but
there's a reason, Christian, and appreciate the call. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Christian.
I think, one, he was a much better player in 2024. So a lot of those early rankings are based off of 2024 film and tape. So people have their preseason rankings, and those stay pretty static until you get towards the end of the year. So that's why I think he started on the top 10 for most people. On tape, he looks like a pretty good athlete. He moves well. He's athletic. But frankly, he did not play well in 2025. He had a bad year. He had no production. A lot of that pop and athleticism did not show up as much in 2025. He weighed in under 300 pounds at the combine, did not test well at the combine, did not test well at the pro day. His post-draft process combined with his in-season production has been pretty bad. So I think that's why you've seen his conversation. I mean, we had Mickey Plyer, and Christian, I recommend you go listen to Mickey Plyer yesterday. He's been covering Clemson for years. He hosts a radio show down there in Spartanburg. I was even more skeptical about Peter Woods after listening to him talk about him after the interview.
Not encouraging.
No, it is not.
But yeah, I mean, Peter Woods, his first 2 seasons at Clemson, even though as a freshman he didn't play as much, his playing time has increased the 3 years he has been there. He was good as a freshman in limited snaps. Then 2024, he was great. And Christian's right. He was projected going into the 2025 college football season as a top 5, top 10 pick.
He was considered the top player on some people's boards.
He was considered like one of, if not the top defensive players returning to college football. This past season, he just was not consistent. He did not, he showed flashes at times of that same player from 2024, but not even close to a consistent week in and week out force in the interior defensive line at Clemson. And, you look at the stats alone. I mean, he had 8.5 tackles for loss during that great sophomore season. That went down to 3.5 this past year. And he played almost twice as many snaps. He played 335 snaps in 2024. Yeah. 562 this past season, and his numbers went down. So
not good.
It's not good, and that's not saying that he can't still turn things around and still could be a very good NFL defender in the interior defensive line. He just hasn't shown enough. Didn't show enough this past year to clearly, have teams feel comfortable. Like this is a locked and loaded top 15 or top 20 pick. Like he does, based on how he played this past year. He does belong in the early second round.
And this is why this is a much different draft class. I have a grade when I do my rankings. It's kind of a first/second round grade, but it has a separate designation. It's the boom or bust designation, right? Where I can see this guy being really good, but there are pretty obvious ways in which I can see this guy out of the league in 3 or 4 years. And 2 of the guys that were supposed to be like top 10 picks in this year's draft class, top 5 picks, Peter Woods and Keldrick Falk, they both have that grade for me. Yep. Where I can see a world where these guys end up being really, really good. I could see a world where maybe Buss might be a little strong, because I do think Keldrick Falk will be a good run defender no matter what happens. But I could see Falk being a 0 as a pass rusher. I could see Woods not making it. Like, those are not out of the realm of possibility for me. So it's one of the reasons all the guys that people thought were going to be those blue chip players in this year's draft class, they didn't develop into those blue chip players, which is why it's so much difference. And I'm going to say one thing, and I know this is very unpopular. Giant fans are not going to be happy with me. But I think the front office might think likewise. I don't think Roy Robertson Harris is a bad football player.
Me neither.
Giant fans want to throw him away, and I know his PFF grades were bad last year. I get all that. If you actually watch the tape, I thought he was fine against the run last year. He's big, he's long, he's powerful. He can play nose backing up Dexter. He can play the 3 technique. I think he's going to be fine. Is he a plus player where he's going to be like, challenging for Pro Bowl votes or whatever? No, but that's fine.
That's not what he was saying.
I think if you play Roy Robertson Harris, he is going to give you good, solid, competent snaps at one of those defensive tackle spots as a depth piece. And if you have to start him, you have to start him. Do I want to add someone else there, Matt? I do. I would love to add somebody else to the position. But I don't want to overlook Roy Robertson Harris like he doesn't exist. Because remember, I believe he only signed a 2-year deal when he came here last year, if I remember correctly. So. It would have been very easy to just let him go, right? It would have been very easy to do. They didn't. He's still here.
Yeah.
That's because they value him. The coaches in the front office value him and the role he can play on the defensive line.
Look, I agree completely. Going into last season, going into training camp, that was my pick for most underrated move of the Giants offseason. And obviously it didn't pan out that way, but honestly, you can't really point to any individual on the Giants defense last year and say that like they performed well above expectations. The whole defense struggled, obviously. And between the record, you just look at the numbers. I'm not breaking any news there. So I do as well have faith in Roy Robertson Harris. Again, I don't think it's fair to expect him to be, a Pro Bowl or All-Pro interior lineman next to Dexter Lawrence. But I do think he can very much play that, veteran role of 30-plus snaps a game.
30 snaps. That's a great number. Great number.
And play well in those 30 snaps and see, at the very least, significantly boost the run defense.
I'm with you. Santa Clara hanging with Kentucky here, Citak. 1-point game. 17 minutes to go in the game here. One more caller that we're going to get to before we say goodbye, then a couple YouTube comments I'll get to too. Steven in Plattsburgh. Steven, what's going on, man?
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Excellent. What do you got?
I want to talk about the draft a little bit. I'm hanging out for Sonny Styles at 5, of course. The one thing I really want to congratulate you guys on is the fact now with the new regime, we are talking about 80% to 20% happy fans as opposed to unhappy fans, the 20 to 80 unhappies.
Well, Steven, let's just hope once they start playing football games, that doesn't change.
Well, some of us old-timers remember the Yale Bowl. You guys don't.
No.
Paul Dottino would.
Oh, absolutely.
But those teams were as bad as today's teams are. The new regime, I called in before, says, gives me confidence. John, if we don't get Sonny Styles, and I really think that Dable is going to stick it to us and take him.
I can see you picking Jeremiah Love too, Steven, to be honest with you. I think the interesting players for me, I think Tennessee and Arizona are the 2 wild card teams picking ahead of the Giants. Everyone just assumes Arizona's picking an offensive tackle because it's a need. They have so many needs on that team. I could see them doing a million different things. Tennessee needs an edge. They need a middle linebacker. They need a running back. They need a receiver. I don't think anyone has a damn clue what either one of those 2 teams are going to do, to be totally honest with you.
Honestly, I've seen edge defender to Arizona.
Why they call the draft a crapshoot.
I'm sorry, Steven, say that again. Go ahead.
I say exactly why they call the draft a crapshoot.
Yep.
Yeah.
At 5, I think we're going to get phone calls if we do miss Sonny Styles. I'm looking at Cincinnati. They're at 10, I believe. Reuben Bain's going to be there. Maybe Bailey, a couple other players. if we trade down to 10, what do you think the other pick we would get would be? Would it be a second rounder?
Yeah, if you go from 5 to 10, you should get whatever that, unless they have 2 first-round picks, you should get whatever that team's top second-round pick is. Absolutely.
Okay, so my scenario there would be at 10, I'm really thinking that Maui Noah or Fano are still going to be there.
Or by the way, Maui Noah, Fano, or Cornell Tate. I think one of those 3 should still be on the board at number 10. Or, by the way, it's not impossible that Caleb Downs is still available at 10 either.
Well, I'm strictly thinking O-lineman.
Okay. Why?
And then if you snap, you're still going to keep your 37 pick.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get something in the second round, close to that, I like Lee Hunter a lot. He's going to have to become best friends with the dietitian. And then if you have your 37 or somewhere in that area, then we're going to look, I almost would take Mansour Delane at 10 if I missed on the other 2 because I really like Domingo Pregnon.
I was going to say, at 10, you might still have your choice of any of the top, whoever you have is your top cornerback, could all still be available at 10.
Absolutely. And Delane is getting a lot of press.
Yeah, and look, I would have no problem with Mansour Delane at 10 also.
Pick up one more pick. I want to save a draft pick for Betzer because Oregon has a great team.
I love that.
And that kid's a Harbaugh guy. And one of those Iowa linemen, the whole front line is going to get drafted, and the kid at center is supposed to be the strongest man on the team, and that's something to brag about.
Yeah, I mean, if you walk out of this draft with a couple of Iowa offensive linemen, I would have no beef with that. They're always good.
Oh.
Same.
And Paul likes the guy with the flowing locks there.
Dunker? Yeah, he's fun.
Dunker.
He's a character, man.
Paul's man. That's about all I have.
Thank you, Steven. Appreciate the call, my friend.
Thank you, Steven.
All right, we got a couple YouTube comments real here, and I think he's thinking the right stuff, Steven. I think he's on the right path in terms of what he's thinking.
I agree.
I'm not sure you need an offensive tackle that early, but that's just me. All right, real quick on the YouTube comments. I know we're running late here. Is camp available to the public in East Rutherford this year? Giants have made no announcements on that. We saw the reports about the West Virginia thing, but the Giants have not made any announcements yet. Just keep in mind, there's a lot of construction around here, and then you also have the World Cup here this summer. So there's going to be some challenges. When the Giants are ready to make an announcement on that, they will make an announcement on that. Bruce D. Richards, by the way, we always get comments about what I'm wearing on these shows. I love it. I think it's hilarious. Keep them coming. It's fantastic. All right?
You're not dropping hints on us?
This is what the fans want to know. Bruce D. Richards. Nah, man. Schmeelk just loves flexing on us. Deutschland NYU crew neck. God damn. All right, I like that. All right, and then Alex Geller, I heard we were going international this year. You're rocking the Germany hoodie as a hint. Well, as Bruce pointed out, not a hoodie. It is a crew neck. This is a Carl Banks special, thanks to one of our partners, Starter. But no, I'm just as anxious as you are to figure out if we're going international this year. Could be, maybe. A lot of the games have been announced. Like, I think it can't be Madrid based on who they announced the home team is out there. And I believe the Saints are the home team in Paris.
I think they already announced the matchup for the Paris game.
Oh, did they?
Saints-Browns.
Oh, is the Browns?
Everyone was like, this is how you're introducing France to football? You're giving them Cleveland Browns?
That's right. I do remember that. And I think the home team in Madrid is the team the Giants are not playing.
Yeah, you can eliminate some of the international cities based on what's been announced already. We don't know, honestly.
It's a possibility.
We genuinely don't know.
No, we don't. Trust me, all of us want to know so we can make our plans for the fall.
But
Trust
in
me.
the years past, they have, I want to say around the league meetings announced
sometimes
just the international games or right after the league meetings, which is obviously a little bit before the whole schedule comes out. So maybe, hopefully, we find out in the next couple of weeks.
Before the draft, maybe?
Because I and my wife would also very much like to know if we are going international.
Oh, that is the question I get. It's not, she does not care about like who the Giants are signing. And she's like, if we're going to Europe this year, because then I got to get on the phone with my brother to see if he could watch my kids for the weekend so that she could book her flight and we can go out to wherever we're going. All right. Alex Geller with the re-signing of Izudu and other guards. Do you think we still pick up more people there, or are we okay with our guard spot going into the draft? I still think we'll see a veteran there at some point.
Yeah, we answer that. Either a veteran or someone somewhat high up in the draft, or maybe even both.
One of my favorite usernames from our YouTube chat, by the way. Combining Mandalorian with the DeLorean from Back to the Future. I brought this up yesterday. It's fantastic. Do you think C.J. Allen will make it to pick 37? I asked you that.
It's definitely possible.
I would say 60-40 no, but 40% is pretty good.
I lean towards no as well, but given his size, just because he's undersized for that linebacker
and he
spot,
hasn't tested.
It's possible.
And if he has a knee, like that was one of the Jordan Reed had that report that he had a meniscus thing done. So all that could push him down.
And if it does, if he ends up going, even if it's not 37th, 40th, that could be a steal for whatever team ends up getting him.
Yeah, could be. Same user. Thoughts on Giants trading back with Miami, swapping first rounders, and the Giants get their third and fourth round picks. All right, see, that's more realistic. Other people were trying to do the
I messaged you as soon as the Jalen Waddle trade came out. I messaged you and Dan Salomon. What about 5 for wherever their 2 first-round picks sit? And that was
then I dropped the wet blanket on you.
Yeah, that's probably a little too rich. But
yes,
in
that's
addition,
realistic.
In that trade, they also picked up another third-round pick, and I believe they now have 4 third-round picks.
I believe that's correct.
So maybe it's not dropping down from 5 to wherever their first-round pick is. I want to say it's in the early teens somewhere. And this is what I said to you.
12, I believe.
Maybe
right? No,
a little more realistic. Maybe could be dropping from 37 to their second round pick, which I want to say is 43 or 44, 45 in that range. Dropping there and picking up one of those 4 third round picks. That I think is, could be a possibility.
Yeah, because
I can't imagine Miami actually drafts 4 players in the third round.
I've been saying it all offseason. I think the drop down from 37 is much more realistic than the drop down from 5.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot easier to make that happen.
But the last part, I don't know if the Giants are sending a first round pick and more for Devon Achane.
Well, send back a pick for Achane or possibly Kevon.
But the reports are that they want a first round pick.
Oh, is that what they're saying?
Yeah.
Well, you're not picking. No, I mean
exactly.
No.
So,
and again,
that's
you're trading
as great as he is. That's also not exactly the type of running back I would imagine would be the perfect fit for the type of game that John Harbaugh wants to run.
Not a bad guy to pair with Scatterbo, though.
That's true. But if you're giving up premier assets for Achane, you would think it's to make him your featured running back.
The bigger problem is that you get to pay him then, too.
You have to pay him, and I know this past year he was phenomenal.
He's going into his third year or fourth year? Third year, I want to say. Hold on, I got that. I'll check it.
But he's not the biggest guy, and earlier in his career had those injury concerns. Go from year 1 where he played limited snaps but was outstanding in those limited snaps. He didn't get on the field that much. He played 11 games because he was on and off because of injuries.
He is 1 year away from free agency.
He's been healthy the last 2 years, but that just the last 2 years doesn't make me forget everything that happened before that, which is, I'm not saying he's got a red flag injury concern.
I agree.
But to give up a premier asset and then have to give him a big contract, that is where I would be hesitant to do so.
That's all the time we have for Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. And from the Hackensack Marine Hill podcast here to keep getting better, for Matthew Citak, I'm John Schmeelk. We're back on Monday for another episode as we continue our look at college prospects and take your calls on the NFL drafts. We'll be back on Monday. Enjoy your NCAA basketball over the weekend.
Let's go Vandy tomorrow night.
Let's go SLU. Come on, let's do it. All right, talk to you guys later. Have a good weekend.